Hello and welcome to the Run As Well podcast with me, Rick Pearson.
And me, Ben Hobson.
Today we're talking about how to build stronger feet with podiatrist Tracy Byrne.
The bedrock of good running, form and power
Is the foot.
it's got to be.
And yet, it's so often overlooked in favour of other muscles such as the glutes or indeed the quad.
Oh, don't forget the old hamstring.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, it's great. Tracy's an absolute wealth of knowledge when it comes to good foot care, good foot health, how runners need to take care of those little piggies. So, it was great to have her in to chat through it.
Yeah, I think so. I think if you're looking for like a kind of one-stop shop for running centred foot advice, this is the episode for you.
Yeah,
so I've learned strap in.
I've learnt some stuff. I'm going to buy a foot file. I'm going to get rid of some of that hard skin. Going to be
Got some foot exercises.
Yeah,
The lot.
toga.
Exactly.
That was always the
Are you almost back to running, Ben?
mate. Here we go.
Go on.
It's crunch time, everyone. I'm getting an injection.
Okay.
I'm getting an injection in my back. It's a steroid injection into the nerve root.
Right.
Let's see what happens. Statistics say something will.
Something positive, hopefully.
Something positive will happen. I've been doing some sort of jogging around with the kids, and they ride their bikes and I jog around, and the symptoms are still there, but they're getting better. So, fingers crossed, the wonders of medical science are going to come along and fix me in some great capacity.
Right. Yeah, I think it's a positive move, isn't it? You're trying to find something to.
Everything I've read about it, which I'm quite sort of funny with whenever it comes to sort of like in anything intrusive,
of course,
you've got to be a bit more like, well, okay, what does it mean and what does that do the science suggests that it's a good thing in terms of potential benefits of what it can do to alleviate troublesome nerves. So that is good. It's going to be a bit of work to obviously get back to fitness and to make sure that things are nice and strong,
Of course.
as these things dictate, but fingers crossed, touching wood.
Yeah.
All will be fine.
I'm sure it'll be fine.
All will be good. But in other news, you've written a musical.
Yeah, this is kind of a little bit of a tangent, but yeah, it's my other great love, music. As people who are fans of the jingle will know. I'm not sure there is a fan of the jingle, but it's still out there.
Well, yeah.
And that's right. So it's going to Edinburgh. It's the Gwyneth Paltrow ski trial musical. So
It's the most sort of left field, unexpected move from Mr. Rick Pearson. But he has co-written a musical based on the ski trial of Gwyneth Paltrow.
That's right.
And I've seen it. It's very funny.
Oh, that's very nicely, Ben.
And it is going to be at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival.
Which is a great running seat, actually.
Yeah,
You've got
great.
half a seat, haven't you?
I think Ali Ball of Runners World is doing the Edinburgh half soon.
Yeah, meant to be a great marathon. I think there's something called the Seven Hills of Edinburgh. That's more of a deep cut for kind of hill fans.
Deep cut for their heads out there.
Yeah, but I do think if you were based in Edinburgh, I think you're in Scotland, which has obviously got some amazing hill running. So
hey, well, look, Rick's going to be in Edinburgh soon for the Fringe. So
join me.
If anyone wants to take him out for a nice run, let us know.
That'd be amazing. Insights into Edinburgh-based running, please. Podcast at runaswell.co.uk.
Right, enough of this shameless self-promotion. By the way, the musical stars Diana Vickers.
That's right, yeah.
TV's famous Diana Vickers. It's a big deal, guys. Anyway, should we get our guest of the week?
Let's do that.
Guest of the week, here in the studio. Guest of the week, sometimes on the phone. Could be an athlete, could be a physio, or a complete unknown.
Our guest this week is a podiatrist working out of London's Holistic Health Clinic and is here to tell us more about how to build stronger, healthier feet. So Tracy Byrne, welcome to Run As Well podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on. I think that although running's quite obviously, the foot is playing quite a major role in a runner's life, it's not an area that a lot of runners think about in terms of like strengthening or looking after their feet. But what are some of the reasons why that is actually a good idea?
So there are lots and lots and lots of different reasons, but probably the main ones I would say are because your foot acts predominantly as a shock absorber. Right. And so when you run, you increase the shock and the forces going through the foot tenfold, 20-fold, 100-fold, depending on your cadence and how much running you're doing a week. And so looking after your feet becomes a priority. What usually happens, or people who present to me and my colleagues tend to have injured the foot or injured the lower limb and then see me. And actually, prevention really is better in this case.
On Rick's point, I guess there's that thing that people don't consider like the foot as like, will always be like, I've got to do my quads and my calf and all these extra bits and pieces. From like a sort of intrinsic, like the elements of the foot, what parts are we talking about here? Like the balls of the foot, the heel, the bone structure, like there's all the sort of elements of like what can be a weakness for runners.
So, and again, there are lots and lots of weak points, but actually probably the big toe, that's one of your anchor points, and that can be injured quite easily. It's the first place that we see arthritic changes, and so that's something that we really want to prevent rather than have to fix later, and that often shows in runners earlier just because of the amount of steps they're taking in comparison to your regular 10 steps a day kind of person. The arch is really important, and that's based on your foot type. Years ago we were taught to make everybody's foot neutral, and actually what we now know is that's not the case. Everybody has a foot type. Some people are flat-footed, some people roll out. It's not necessarily a problem, but it is something that we need to be aware of. So, you don't need special running trainers, for example, but you may need help in terms of orthotics or insoles or special intrinsic stretches that can be done. And then the heel is another hot spot, because obviously most runners, I think you'll have the percentages, heel strike. And so what that means is that most of that first impact they have with the ground is going through the heel, and that can lead to things like plantar fasciitis, fasciopathy, Achilles problems, and so that needs to be looked at.
It's interesting that about kind of flat feet. So I've got quite flat feet, and I think for years I was like, oh, that's like a sense. Like, I think like years ago you wouldn't have got in the army if you had flat feet. It was looked at like that, wasn't
exactly
it? Like
right.
sort of like an
Exactly
ailment.
right.
Is a lack of an arch a sign of a weak foot? Is it problematic, or should people actually just be like, no, it's cool, actually, that's just what your foot is like?
Absolutely not an ailment. So it's a foot type. And as I alluded to, years ago, we were taught that flat feet were problematic. And like you say, you weren't allowed into the armed forces if you had flat feet. But actually what we now know, it's a foot type. Yes, it can cause problems, but it doesn't always cause problems. So that's the really important point to note. So some people have flat feet, forever and ever, never causes any problems. Some people have flat feet that do cause problems. There are other issues that can exacerbate a flat foot type, things like excessive movement, weight gain, obesity, that kind of thing. So, it's not just the flat foot, but essentially it's not a problem. And so you don't need to create an arch if it's not there. So lots of research and studies have been done into tribes where everybody is flat-footed and there are no foot problems, no foot ailments, no shoes, which is a bit of a pointer. And so it's not a problem in itself.
On your point about foot type and foot strength, and the shoe not really being something that's necessarily the sort of the cause or the thing, where maybe an orthotic could help later on. How is there because in the past shoes have always been like, oh, you need this type of shoe to control the foot, or you need this type of shoe to be neutral, and this will solve a certain injury type pattern thing.
Yes.
Is the injury pattern really just the foot needs work rather than the shoe doing the work of sort of helping the foot?
It's a bit of both,
right.
Actually. It's a bit of both. So, as I said, foot type isn't necessarily a problem. If your foot type becomes a problem, or if you injure your foot, not related to your foot type, then shoes can be extremely helpful and probably the most efficient and cheapest way of helping to alleviate that problem. So lots of foot problems benefit from a padded shoe. Not all. And so, we start talking about barefoot running and barefoot shoes and minimalist shoes. Every shoe is not for every person. And so if you are suffering from a pathology, or you have injured something due to overuse or running form or whatever it might be, or broken a bone or something like that, shoes are a really good sort of first aid, really. And then we can add to that in terms of additional padding like insoles, custom-made orthotics. So it's really dependent on the individual and how they present. And like I said, things like weight and previous injuries, shin splints, broken pelvis 20 years ago, they all have an impact. And so it's really important that a podiatrist assesses that patient as an individual. But shoes are definitely our sort of first aid, really, for an injury, whether that's just a change in shoes or a more padded shoe or a slightly wider shoe. And again, that's very individual.
In terms of like strengthening a foot, because
Yes.
I think that there are kind of bigger muscles in the body where maybe we've got a sense of how you might get stronger quads or stronger glutes. But a lot of people might be like, well, I'd like stronger feet, but how on earth do I go about getting a stronger foot? But it is possible, isn't it?
It is. It absolutely is. And one of the most important things to do is to incorporate foot stretching and foot strengthening into your routine. So we all go to the gym, we all lift. There's lots of research now in terms of how lifting for women is much more important. And so although cardio isn't not important, it's we're definitely moving in terms of sort of, you know, the hormones that women release, the hormones that women lose when it comes to menopause and things like that. And so I think the feet are forgotten. So, you know, we tend to go into the gym, we've got our workouts, so we think, right, I'm going to do my quads, I'm going to do leg day, I'm going to do calves, I'm going to do anterior foot, I'm going to do, you know, and actually what we're not doing is we're not doing anything with our feet. So although our feet walk us into the gym and they help us to, you know, squat however many kilos you're squatting, I've never seen a workout program, apart from my own, that has a list of foot stretches. So intrinsic foot stretching can strengthen the foot and can prevent injury. So they should be incorporated completely into a stretching routine, particularly post-run and pre-run, because I think they're generally not done for very long.
Can you give a sense of what it's hard on a podcast, isn't it? To be like, this is what this is
demonstrate.
What it is. But just like and as simple as possible. Like what would some of that look like?
So the easiest ones, and you can visualize these without looking, without, you know, just by speaking, are splaying your toes.
Oh yeah.
So try to imagine your foot should look exactly like your hand. And actually, on early X-rays, your hands looked like your feet, and they were very difficult to tell apart. And so splaying your toes. One of the things that we tend to do is our toes tend to be squeezed together because we're constantly wearing shoes, and so our toes tend to taper, which is what causes bunions and various foot pathologies. Scrunching your toes, so imagining that you're picking something up from the ground, whether that's a sock or a hairband or a ball or whatever it might be. So scrunching and splaying your toes, and what that does, it just extends all of those tendons and soft tissues in the toes, and so keeps them nice and supple and can strengthen that. To take that further, coming up onto the tiptoes, coming back down onto the heels, that's really important for calf strength, Achilles strength and plantar fascia strength, which is often forgotten, and usually then results in plantar fascia injury, which we then see too late. And just rotating the ankles clockwise, anti-clockwise, doing things like a ballerina point. You can imagine a ballerina pointing her toes, his or her toes, I should say. And those are a really good start for foot strengthening.
Yeah, quite simple, aren't they? It's not take too long, is it?
You can do them at your desk. You can do them with your shoes on or off. You don't have to stop what you're doing. So these are things, actually, if you look at a toddler in a pushchair, you'll find that toddler does those all of the time without any instruction. Then we put shoes on them and it stops. And so that's telling.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
I think let's get into the sort of the shoe then, and me and Rick have spoken fairly semi-regularly about how we've worn a barefoot type shoe, not for running, just as a daily, or a walking boot particularly, or some sort of something in the mix with all our other regular trainers. I'm wearing, a pair of normal shoes right now. Rick is wearing a pair of Vivos, and we just wanted to sort of have that sense of, is that a good thing for everyone? As we've talked about shoes being very prescriptive to an individual. Me and Rick have obviously got to a stage, perhaps in a stage of foot strength where we can have those on for a day and it not cause issue. What would be your advice for someone who's like, all right, I want to improve my foot strength, I can do those exercises, should I adopt a different pair of shoes, a minimalist type of shoe, not for running to begin with, but just for sort of
for life,
and will that have an effect?
It's a really good question, actually. And a few years ago, when the sort of barefoot movement started, I think a lot of people were seduced by the idea that wearing minimalist shoes would strengthen their foot on its own. But actually, it's not quite as simple as that. And as you allude to, it's not for everybody. So if you wanted to go down that route, it's a good idea that you don't immediately change from a regular padded running shoe to a minimalist shoe overnight and just wear those, because what can happen is your body just goes into spasm and says, look, I don't know what you're doing. I've been in padded shoes for years and years and years. And then if you add to that the amount of steps that you're taking, the kind of ground that you're walking on. So we're in London. This is, concrete slabs and tarmac. We weren't designed to be on those anyway. And so it's important that you don't immediately kind of ditch your old shoes. So transition period is really helpful, where you are strengthening your feet using some of the stretches that I suggested, wear your minimalist shoes and then listen to your body to see what changes are occurring. But I wouldn't go in straight away. Barefoot shoes, minimalist shoes, they're not for everybody. And again, that's very individual. That's dependent on how large you are, how much weight you're carrying, how many steps you're taking, what weight you're carrying in terms of bags on your back, rucksacks, that kind of thing. So again, it's very individual, and you're better off, doing your research, gradually transitioning in, and then listening to your body.
On the flip of that, running shoes these days are becoming more and more cushioned. They're much softer. The progression of foam and the technology behind it is allowing a bigger and bigger shoe, softer and softer.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and all those guys. Is that detrimental to foot strength, or it doesn't work like that? If you're still moving your foot in a certain way in a certain type of shoe, is it still going to build a certain type of strength? Are you still coping with the shoe? Is it, because we've sort of always talked about this minimalist thing and this, how much control you're having, but honestly, we're still running in big shoes and the foot is working. Yeah. So I guess it's just, regardless of shoe, perhaps it's still the foot will behave in a way it wants to behave.
Absolutely. My concern with the really, really padded shoes is what you gain in cushioning and offloading, which is great for injury and pathology. You may well lose in proprioception. And so what that means then is the runner has to look at the ground a little bit more, because they can't really feel where they are in relation to the ground, which is really important for balance and speed. So I think, again, really individual. So, I see patients who really benefit from a Hoka type shoe just because they really need that padding. And we're talking about somebody who has a bony injury, or perhaps they have plantar fasciitis that just hasn't resolved. They've tried everything. They maybe came to see us too late, which is often the case. So again, what you gain in cushioning, you maybe lose in proprioception. So again, always completely individual.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it wasn't a study actually, it was an opinion of now his name's going to escape me, but he is a sort of foot and movement specialist in the US. Jay Dickory. He's got a book called Running Rewired. But he talks about having a rotation of shoes, which was like a minimalist shoe for which said you shouldn't do quick running in that. It should be your walking and jogging shoe, and maybe only gets an outing once, twice a week. Your workhorse, which was quite like a relatively cushioned shoe. Yeah. And then if you were into racing and you wanted to chase PBs, then maybe you'd get yourself one of the kind of carbon plate shoes. What do you think about rotating footwear? That always seems to be a good idea.
It is, and it's something that we recommend to patients, runners and non-runners, simply because it makes your foot behave in a different way. And if your foot behaves in a different way, your foot is being exercised more. It's as simple as that. So, you look at anybody, they'll have a collection of shoes dependent on weather, dependent on what they're doing for the day, the outfit they're wearing. So shoe rotation, I think, is a good idea in general. And as you say, having that minimalist shoe for a marathon, maybe not so good. Yeah. But doing your foot stretches as you're walking from the tube and around your office, great idea. So shoe rotation is a really good idea. Cool.
It's time for an advert. And now back to the podcast.
What about sitting and standing? We all often talk about like standing up is like a bit of a sort of secret source of like of health.
Well, if you're desk bound, we're talking like if your day-to-day lifestyle doesn't allow much movement, as in your office, or you're an office worker or are not particularly, that sort of stuff. That's when the sitting, standing thing comes in, right?
Yeah, because I worry, like, say how we're sitting for this podcast, like our feet aren't taking much load, are they? Often when you're in a chair, your feet might not even be on the ground. Yes. Is standing up one thing that a lot of people could do more of in terms of foot strength?
Absolutely. I think the benefits for foot strength and general health are probably fairly equal, actually. And yes, the more you're using your foot, the more it's exercised. The more you lift weight, the more that muscle is used. So I think any standing, walking, any movement at all, anything that allows your feet to move in a different way is a good idea. And it also prevents leg crossing and ankle crossing, which can be detrimental to our circulation, particularly if you're at a desk for hours and hours in the day. So I think standing desks are a really good idea. Setting an alarm on your phone to get up for, a 5-minute walk every hour. So all of those kind of things. And they all add into that 10,000 steps or, that calorie burn that you're just doing from living day to day. So it's all good, yeah.
We've talked about footwear for us adults. and we both have young children who I've put in different types of barefoot shoe as they've been growing, and you're the same, aren't you? And and I've sort of, as a young lad who was just put in a pair of shoes that was like on sale, because that's, as rightly so, kids get through shoes rapidly, and you want to just put them in something that's affordable. What about if we look at the sort of the pliable, moldable young foot? How important is that now to sort of take into context of just like the shoes that they're going in? And we're not talking about like future Olympians. We're talking about just looking after foot health from a young age.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So my specialism is in paediatrics, so I see lots and lots of children, mainly for reassurance for parents that they know that they're doing the right thing, because the message out there can be confusing. You've got all of these amazing barefoot companies who are going up against maybe Start Rights, who provide a really rigid your foot needs support kind of model. So the general rule for me is that children shouldn't wear a shoe until they're walking outside. That's the first thing. So things like pram shoes and little kind of cute Nike trainers are just really a no-no, for the reasons that we talked about before in terms of, movement of the feet. So if you look at a baby or a toddler who's barefoot or in a pair of socks, they never ever stop moving their feet, just as much as their hands. When they do need to go into a shoe, then there's a checklist. So rather than me recommending a brand, and there are some fabulous brands out in the market, the shoe needs to be really flexible, lightweight, foot-shaped, and have an adjustable closure, so a Velcro for that age range, but barefoot as often as possible. And again, that helps to strengthen everything. I don't have any problem with hand-me-downs. It's a question that a lot of people ask. I don't think children are ever in a shoe for long enough to misshape it so much so that it then is passed on to the sibling or the friend. But that's the general rule.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that plays on my mind quite a lot. When you see them running around and you want them to be as comfortable as possible, and as you say, we're in London, so I do worry about them sort of smashing around on hard surfaces the whole time in a barefoot shoe. But sort of hope that they're not as rigid and as solid as my old bones and all that sort of stuff. So I think it's certainly one thing, and as your specialism, I think it's quite important to just sort of raise it as a topic. Yeah.
Let's look at the kind of other spectrum of shoes. So I think maybe women are probably more affected by this. But what about like people who walk around in high heels and stuff? Would that be the kind of the nightmare scenario for your foot, a shoe like that?
Yeah, the high heels and the very pointed or tapered shoes, and over the last 10 years, I think men have fallen into that trap, particularly wearing dress shoes. So high heels, obviously your centre of balance is pushed really far forward. Not only that, but your calf muscle tends to shorten because you are then finding it more difficult to put your heel on the ground because you've got a massive heel in the way. And then a high heel is usually tapered at the front, so that can cause other problems in terms of bunions, early onset of bunions, exacerbation of bunions, which can be really painful and lead to arthritic changes earlier than we might expect. So as I was saying about men, this tended not to be a problem 10 or 12 years ago, and then men started going into very tapered, pointed shoes. So we've seen an increase in the number of male patients that we have with corns, calluses, bunions on the front part of their foot. I think COVID did us a lot of favours because we work from home, so it meant that we didn't have to dress to go to work. And I think now that people are slightly more relaxed in offices, again, that helps. And I think there was a court case with one of the big airlines in terms of, women not wearing heels. So that's all helping the cause, and it's all helping podiatrists to preach this sort of, please don't wear high heels, please don't wear pointy. So it's all very helpful. But yeah, so those are shoes that, a night out, maybe once in a while, yes,
sure,
but certainly not all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
In terms of being kinder to feet, we've talked about strengthening them and trying to sort of make them as robust as possible. But what about sort of some TLC, especially like post-run, perhaps when they're feeling very sore, or like, is soaking them in a salt bath or something, is that good for them? And before we started recording, should we be going and seeing a podiatrist for skincare and all
Yes.
those sorts of things.
Yeah, absolutely. So before and after, really important. So we see a lot of runners sort of pre-match who come to have a bit of a checkup and maybe remove some of the hard skin, making sure that nail cutting is looked at, because so many people cut their nails in the wrong way, which can lead to ingrown toenails, which we see a lot of, particularly our male runners, actually.
Me, guilty.
And so that's really important. But yes, after run, after training, then a foot soak is really good. What you put in the water doesn't really matter. There are varying opinions on salt and magnesium salts and all the rest of it. It's the warm water that does the nice stuff. So whatever you want to add to make that smell nice and feel good, that's absolutely fine. Removing hard skin, you can do that yourself with a foot file. You can see a podiatrist to do that, and making sure that any corns or calluses are taken care of early, because once they take hold, they can feel like a stone in your shoe, and that's really very uncomfortable. So and then moisturising your feet is really important. I think it's the one body part that we forget to moisturise, and that's really important. We have more sweat glands in our feet than anywhere else, and we don't put that moisture back in, so that's really, really important too.
That's interesting. So tell us about this nail. Well, we have talked about nail cutting before, actually, because it is interesting. It's a little bit different to the fingers, isn't it? Because with toes, you're meant to cut straight across. Is that right, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And I think so what we see is the big nail particularly is really susceptible to ingrown toenail. And what we have a tendency to do is round off the corners, because that's what we do with our fingernails. But actually they should be cut straight across. And people have this sort of idea in their head that the corners might cut through their socks or do something else. But actually that's not the case. So toenails, particularly the big ones, should be cut straight across. Otherwise you end up with problems in terms of ingrown toenails, and that can lead to nasty infections and not very pleasant.
Yeah, because I think a lot of runners, myself included, have lost toenails. I reckon I've lost 7 out of 10. Just haven't lost the 2 big ones, but it's other than that. And
it's usually the second one.
Yeah, the second one's got so
down the hills.
Well, say that's happened to you, which I think is pretty common. And some people have done the London Marathon or various marathons and probably will be losing as we speak.
This is about the time, actually, April. Yeah.
But if you're in that boat, what can you do to make sure that the next toenail is given the best possible chance of kind of growing okay? So
the reason that we lose that sometimes a third toenail tends to be because that's a longer toe. We always assume that the big toe is longer. It's generally not. Second toe can be slightly longer. What that means is on a downhill that the end of that nail is under trauma during the run, during the training. So it's important to keep that nail nice and short, but straight across, not rounded. And just making sure that you check the nail regularly, have it checked by a podiatrist if you're not sure. What can often happen is the toenail becomes bruised before it comes off, and that's generally a sign. So it's a good idea at that point maybe to see a podiatrist who can assess it, perhaps take it off in a pain-free way, so that you then have the chance of a new nail growing through, nice healthy nail. But keeping an eye on it, keeping them short, and just making sure that you're wearing well-fitted trainers that fit you, which we don't always buy the right size trainers. Every brand is sized differently, so that's
Often with feet, it seems like getting on problems early is the key, right? Because I think that's the case with say someone's got like a fungal nail, which I think is in sort of fell running and trail running is a bit more of a
sweaty shoe all day long,
or wet kind of environments. Can you tell us what? Yeah, and kind of the flip of that is you get some kind of cures for these things that are on the internet, and I'm not completely sure how credible some of them are. So could you give us some clarity on that area?
So, fungal nail infection is a tricky one. So feet and nails love hot, sweaty environments. So as you say, if you're trail running or if you're, working construction, for example, and you're wearing boots that don't allow breathability, then you're really susceptible to fungal nail infection. Unfortunately, most topical treatments are just not strong enough for license, and therefore anything that you buy over the counter tends not to work very well. So the next course of action is to have an antifungal treatment, which you can get from your GP. And what the GP will normally do is send away a clipping of your nail to check that it is indeed fungal nail infection, not some sort of bruising or something else. And then that medication can be really successful, and how long you need to take it sort of dependent on how bad your fungal nail infection is to begin with. Or one of the things that we do regularly for people, particularly who've tried everything, who've tried over-the-counter things, who've tried the antibiotic, the antifungals and haven't worked, is we remove the entire nail. using a local anaesthetic, so it's completely pain-free. Fungal nail infection is then gone immediately. We then treat the nail bed, and then a brand new healthy nail will grow through. So some people just opt to do that straight away, because although it's a small procedure, the results are guaranteed. So
How many nails do you have in the bank? Like how many because it's not like teeth, not like baby teeth, is it? You lose a baby tooth, you get another tooth.
I love that.
That's it.
That's a really good question. I've never been asked that question before.
How many nails keep coming? Like if you lost the second one twice, would the third one appear?
They're not singular nails like teeth, actually.
Right.
It's continuous nail bud, and so you will never run out. You'll never run out.
You know when you lose a nail, the next one you go is like twice as thick, isn't it? And it seems to grow quicker as well.
Yeah, usually when you lose a nail, whether that's, from running or somebody stamps on your toe or we remove it, what we're doing is we're traumatising the nail bed. Somewhere along the line, the nail bed will have been traumatised. And what that means is that the new nail that grows through, while it be pink and healthy, the shape isn't guaranteed. So it might be a bit thicker, it might be ridged, it might, have a little piece missing. So it's sort of like a scar, part of your character,
Yeah. Oh, interesting. That is interesting, isn't it?
It is. I mean, I'm so guilty of the nail cutting thing, like to the point now where I have to sort of like almost attend to like bits at the side that I know are growing all wrong and all this. Shudders of.
You have to come and see me. No.
But I feel like it's under control.
Sounds like it. Sounds like it then. Yeah.
But no, in terms of. I mean, really, just like really obvious things, but like calluses and bunions and all those sorts of things. What are the early signs of all those sorts of things? Like, what is it like a hot spot? Is it a pain that people should feel? Is it like a very distinct round red? Like
so depends. So if we go through them condition by condition, so callus is the name that we give to hard skin, and so if you lift weights, like I do, you'll find that you have calluses across the inside of your hands, and some of that callus is protective, so you don't want baby soft feet and you don't really want baby soft hands. If you're doing something like that, you need a little bit of protection. So that will just be hard skin. The point at which you need to do something is when that hard skin becomes painful to touch or sensitive. So on the feet, callus will usually be on a weight-bearing area, so underneath the foot, usually underneath the ball of the foot, or maybe on the side of the little toe or the side of the big toe where we're rubbing on shoes, etc., etc. And so at that point, you can remove that quite easily yourself by using a dry foot file, and then using lots of moisturiser afterwards. It's important to say that should be carried out on a dry foot, so not in the bath, not in the shower, not after, because what you're then doing is you're maybe removing too much and causing more of a problem than you had to begin with. When callus is left untreated, it can become really thick and painful. What can also happen is you can develop a corn underneath that area. So a corn is when your callus gets to the point where you have a little nucleus of skin underneath. And once you develop a corn, that's a really painful thing. And again, that's usually in a weight-bearing area or perhaps on the side of the little toe. And it feels like a stone in your shoe, and it can be incredibly painful. These can be 2-3 millimeters wide, but stop you from walking properly. So they really need to be addressed. With a bunion, the telltale sign with a bunion, usually you start to develop some pain, and that could be sharp pain in the joint when you perhaps come up onto your tiptoes, or it could be a dull ache maybe when you wake up in the morning or when you go to bed at night and you start to notice things more. And at that point, you really do need to seek an assessment from a podiatrist, because it may well be that we can start to prevent any further deviation. Bunions tend to be hereditary. They tend to be about foot type, but the things that we do can exacerbate them. So the things that we do can be shoes, activity, that kind of thing.
That's interesting. So you're more genetically likely to get a bunion, but your lifestyle choices could mean that you get one sooner or later, depending on...
Exactly right. So they're not caused by one pair of ill-fitting shoes, but that pair of shoes might make the bunion considerably worse.
Got you. Right.
Thankfully, I've bypassed those sorts of things.
So yeah, that's
good. Calluses, though, yes. Yeah. I need to get a file, I think.
Yeah.
If people are interested in your work, Tracy, and want to know a bit more about looking after their own feet, where can they find you?
They can find me at tracybyrne.co.uk. My website has a section on all of the different pathologies that we treat. So verrucas, bunions, biomechanics, sports injuries, corns, calluses, ingrown toenails, the whole kit and caboodle is on there.
Great. Thanks so much for coming on the Runners World podcast talking about healthier feet.
And education in feet.
It was actually.
Yeah, it was great.
It was.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me. me. Thank you.
So that brings us to the end of this week's Runners World podcast. Thanks very much to our special guest, Tracy Byrne, and to you, of course, for listening.
You can subscribe to many issues of the Runners World magazine at a great value, fantastic deal price. Just go on the internet, search Runners World UK subscription. The Hearst magazine's website will appear, and there'll be an offer on it for you if you haven't subscribed already. Please subscribe also to this podcast. That's the best thing you can do. I think that's unfair on the magazine, but I'm biased. And I think this podcast, you should subscribe to that. Do it first. It's 1-2. It's like a 1-2 process. Subscribe to this, then the magazine, and that's your best way of doing it. Thank you for listening to this podcast, and you will hear from us next week.